the idea of how we treat our spirit and how that affects us, both in this world and the next world, how it affects others, how spirits interact. I would be interested in seeing how steam interacts, between individuals, if it does, or shine, if it does, or manifests between individuals. I think those things would be interesting. All right, welcome to the podcast where we talk about the big ideas behind fiction projects of all different kinds. Books, TV shows, movies, video games, nothing's off limits. My guest today is Doug Tidwell, a very long-time friend, the guy who introduced me to some great fiction, like the original Tick comics. I don't know if you remember that back in the day. And he's recently retired from being a productive human being. Hi, Doug. Welcome to the show.
Great to be here.
All right, so today's topic is the 2019 film Dr. Sleep, starring Ewan McGregor and Rebecca Ferguson. So, Doug, when you first told me about this movie, it seemed like you had a lot of thoughts. What stood out to you about this film?
Well, I think lately I'm watching movies, and since I'm retired from productive living, I've been watching a lot more movies than I used to in the past. What I find in today's movies, there's not a lot of good story, and coupled with not a lot of good script and not a lot of good acting. Usually you have one component. You have great actors doing a terrible story, or you have a great script with terrible acting and a terrible story. This one, to me, like the first one in a long time, where everything came together and just was a really great story, great script, great acting, like very well directed. And, I had my hesitation at first because the director is very well known for his kind of like horror work or thriller suspense work. But this one was more of like an all-around movie to me. And certainly it had its horror components, yes. But I think it wasn't wrong for the script of the movie. It wasn't wrong for the story and flow of the movie. So I really quite enjoyed it. So that's why. And I thought it was very deep. It was a very long movie. But very, very well done from start to finish, I thought.
Wow, making a lot of great points right out of the gate. I think we're going to be done quick on this one. So you're talking about Mike Flanagan, director of Oculus in 2013, more recently Gerald's Game, an adaptation of the Stephen King story in 2017, something people labeled as unfilmable, but apparently it was pretty good. Did you see Oculus or Gerald's Game?
Yeah, I saw Gerald's Game. I thought it was good. The story would be difficult to translate to a movie no matter who's doing it, but I think it was fairly well done. And also the main actor, I think, was quite excellent. I like him from other movies. He was also in this movie as Dr. Joe.
I was going to say he reuses actors like a lot of directors. So yeah. So I saw Oculus. I think I rented and paid full price for that one, probably in 2013, 2014. I was surprised at the time. It actually was better than I expected. As you would imagine, I really like mediocre films that, like you said, don't meet all three of those criteria. I really like them if they have kind of a cool idea in it. And I thought Oculus was going to be pretty dumb just all around, but I actually got sucked into it. It was really well done. There was a lot of creativity. The story was interesting. I can see why he has a career. He's actually pretty talented at interpreting complicated stuff. Okay, so this movie made about $72 million on an estimated budget of $45 million, which by Hollywood standards is not great. Reviews weren't great, although recently people have been warming up to it a little bit more since it popped up on HBO. Any thoughts on why it did not really kill it in the box office?
Well, I think I can only speak from my personal point of view. My personal point of view was more like I saw the trailer and I thought, wow, The Shining was such an amazing movie. And I look back at the pop culture. I think it came from a long line of it's deeply ingrained, and especially people our age, would think, wow, this movie's been around forever. But I wonder, if it's because it came out too late. I wonder because people younger than us would certainly maybe not even know what The Shining is. And I think one of the things, I was looking up something the other day about The Shining, and I think the most common question is, what is The Shining? What is that? I think it was, unless you read the book, I think even before I saw this movie, I didn't know what The Shining was. I thought it was, the name was maybe not totally related to the book or the story, right? So I think that maybe that wasn't totally clear. Dr. Sleep, I think you can get better, but I think I'm just saying from a title standpoint, from a presentation standpoint, you can't easily understand what the movie's about, or how it's related to the books, and also I think if you're younger than a certain age, like maybe younger than 30, maybe they wouldn't know well about this movie. I don't know about the first movie.
Okay, so I think you were saying a couple of things in there, but I want to make sure I understand. So for old men like yourself who remember when the original movie came out in 1980, it's not as big of a leap to connect to Dr. Sleep and be interested in that, right? Like once you become aware that those two things are connected, then it's interesting to you. But for people like myself who are 18 to 25 or 30 or 35 or somewhere in there, we just don't necessarily know Shining by the movie or by the book, right? Is that
I think that's one guess. I mean, because overall I thought it was a very good movie, and I think you didn't need to know the previous stuff to enjoy it. I think it was like I said, well directed, well scripted, well acted, great cast. So I'm actually a little bit surprised it was such a kind of, let's say, financial flop at the box office. It might be timing as well, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think there was some competition, but you said something else too, which I thought, I can't tell if you were saying this or if it's just an interesting idea that is similar to what you were saying. But so the original Shining concept, you're saying people were looking that up, like what is The Shining, because it wasn't clear from the film what The Shining is?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, but then you said Dr. Sleep, you feel like it's clear from this film where that title comes from.
Yeah, correct.
So what is your read of where does Dr. Sleep come from in this film?
Well, I think that's because that's what they call him in the hospital. And I think, I guess, and this is my, without having read a single page of either of the books, I guess that part in the hospital might have had a bigger part.
It did.
But also, I don't know what else you'd call the movie. I think it's quite interesting that this guy uses his powers kind of for good in a hospice and starts to get called Dr. Sleep. But if you look back at the movie, that was just a very, very small part of the movie. So it's a little bit misleading from a, let's say, titling standpoint to call it Dr. Sleep. Actually, but what do you call it? Like, young girl with Shining gets help from old guy. I don't know. Like, there's not. I think it's a well titled thing, but somehow the title is not very well related to the plot of the movie.
Well, I think you're missing the obvious Little Miss Sunshine.
Yeah, that's right. That's exactly right.
I think that's clearly the best one. Dr. Sleep, according to what I read about the book, right? Dr. Sleep is a reference to Ewan McGregor's character, and it's where he, spoiler alert as always for this podcast, I'm going to spoil the hell out of everything. It's where he ends up in the novel, right? So he's helping people transition from life to death naturally in old age, and he goes back to that at the end of the novel. So he is Dr. Sleep. It's kind of his full cycle, like his resolution, his healing. Right?
Yeah.
So I mean, from that perspective, I think it's a good title. But to me, that makes it a good title of the novel, not necessarily a good title for the movie. Okay. So The Shining 2. What's wrong with that?
I don't think that's too bad. Actually, and this was one of the other things when I was looking up The Shining. I think a lot of people couldn't remember the name of the movie, so they said, "Oh, what's that movie, The Shining 2?" This was one of the big searches that people were looking.
Yeah, so The Shining 2, hotter and steamier. I think that's the way you go. It's really it's right there. Little Miss Steamy.
Little Miss Steamy. Yeah, and yeah, Ferguson's lovely, and she does a great job in the movie, right? So no, it was quite enjoyable. But I think when I was looking back too, I was looking back comparing in a way to the books, because I was looking. There were so many like a lot of controversy how Stanley Kubrick did the first movie, and actually it's quite interesting to me. Like the Dr. Sleep seems to be more of a Shining 2 than it is a Dr. Sleep from the book, right? Because there's a lot of things where it's more following the first movie than it is following closely to the book, as I understand, right? Maybe this part where he's Dr. Sleep is smaller, I guess, but also, one of the interesting things I found was, that I didn't know until I was watched The Shining again recently and looked into it a little more. the original The Shining book, I guess at the end of the book, they burn down the hotel, and that's kind of Jack Torrance's kind of, circle. That's his arc. He comes back, saves the family by burning down the hotel and saving them. And he doesn't kill, he doesn't kill Dick, the guy that's mentoring, little Doc. So I think it's quite interesting. The Dr. Sleep movie keeps kind of the Shining movie storyline a little bit more intact than keeping closer to the book. So this is something I found quite strange. And then I didn't really remember it. Then I found there was I don't know you remember this, there was a 1997 remake miniseries of The Shining.
Oh, I'm so glad you brought that up. So once again, you threw a lot of meat in the water. You got me in a frenzy here. This is there's a lot to talk about. All right, so we're talking about the movie The Shining versus the book, right? Then you talked about how Dr. Sleep, the movie, is a sequel to the book and to the movie, the original Shining book and movie, right? So
That's right.
In different ways. You talked about that. So I just want to break it down a little bit. And you also brought up the miniseries, and we're gonna talk about all that. This is just so exciting for me. All right. So have you recently rewatched the Shining film, the 1980 Shining film?
Yeah, I did because I love Dr. Sleep, and I really couldn't remember a lot of the original movie. Like I didn't even remember that what The Shining was. I didn't remember that there was even a reference to it in the movie, and I've not seen it in a long time. What I do remember is when I watched the movie the first time, I really don't know what year it was. I was about the same age as Danny, right? Yeah, and I looked it up. That guy's born in 1973, right? So the actor in the movie is about my age. So I must have seen it about the time that it came out. Probably when it went to. I didn't see it in the movie theater, so probably I saw it on TV.
Wow, that explains so much about your personality.
I thought that kid was so cool with his little bike cruising around the hotel. That looked like a lot of fun. No, but I rewatched the movie, and actually I was a bit surprised at a few things. Like, they do talk about The Shining, and I'd completely forgotten about the part where Dick and the boy are talking using their minds, and he's kind of introducing them to that, but because it seemed that was almost a sidebar in the movie, and you kind of don't understand what the kid's powers have to do with anything in the rest of the whole movie, right? The kid has powers, and Dad goes crazy and tries to kill them both. Do you know what I mean? And it seems totally unrelated,
Kubrick
right?
Played that down.
I think so.
Yeah.
I think so.
Interesting. Okay, so I actually watched the miniseries from 1997 in preparation for this podcast because I thought it would be a nice counterpoint to the movie and to, Dr. Sleep, the sequel. So, the miniseries, you said there was controversy, right? Specifically, Stephen King did not like the original Shining. So, in a very weird deal, they agreed to make this miniseries in return for him shutting up and no longer bad-mouthing the original film. So in many ways, the miniseries is more like the novels. Stephen King's actually in the miniseries. He plays the ghostly conductor of the band in the third part of the miniseries when the ghosts are just everywhere in really cheap sort of white chalk dead paint, dancing around. And he hams it up like nobody's business. You were trying to say that Dr. Sleep is partially a sequel to Stanley Kubrick's The Shining and partially a sequel to the book. So what aspects? I mean, obviously there's a lot of the film, the Shining film, in Dr. Sleep. What about the book? What did you think was different?
Yeah, no, so I mean, as I recall, and like I say, I didn't read a page of either of the books, but my understanding was the key thing was the ending, was at the end of The Shining, that Jack Torrance redeems himself by, overloading the boilers and making the hotel.
Yeah, he fails to release the steam, I believe. Yeah, and he does that intentionally. And it basically, a lot of this book was written when Stephen King was struggling with alcoholism. And so he wanted the main character to have redemption. And so in the end, he saves his family and blows up the hotel. And in the sequel book, the novel Dr. Sleep, the hotel has been destroyed. It's not I don't know if you remember this, but Michael Crichton, the original Jurassic Park, then it came out, and that was very different from the film, and the film was great, and the novel's great. And then the sequel to Jurassic Park, written by Michael Crichton, was more of a sequel to the movie than it was to his original novel, right? But I think Stephen King wrote Dr. Sleep as a direct sequel to his novel, right? He stayed true to where things were left in that.
Exactly.
Okay. And in the Dr. Sleep film, the ending is different from the novel in part to honor the original Jack Torrance, like in the novel, the original end for him, that's Dan's end in Dr. Sleep, the movie, but not the novel.
Yeah, so I think this is where I was quite curious, because when I was reading that originally he did burn it down in the first novel, then I thought, well, hey, hang on, I saw something where it was burned down, and then I realized I had seen the miniseries and totally forgot about it. Yeah, I had seen it, and I forgot about it, and then I looked at the trailer, and I thought, wow, oh yeah, I did see that. And obviously in 1997, and it's got Rebecca De Mornay, so yes, yes,
she's so good in that.
But it had a little bit of a B grade feel to it, that one, somehow. Like the Kubrick's was a very kind of dark and a lot of imagery, very intense and heavy music, and that one it seemed to me like it was a little bit, I don't know, lighter and a little bit, not as good production value somehow.
Yeah, no, I think you're dead on. I mean, I watched the whole thing on the Internet Archive. It's there for free, complete with the commercials. Apparently, that was about the time Ellen was coming out. I don't remember if you remember the episode, Ellen's The Episode. No. Also, Austin Powers was about to be released, so a lot of commercials for them. It was quite a journey. But there were some key differences that I thought stood out. Now, I've seen the Shining film, but it's been a while. So I'm sure this isn't like an exhaustive catalog of all the differences, but you mentioned early on that there's a conversation between Danny and Halloran, Dick Halloran, I believe is his name, the sort of regular caretaker, where they talk a little bit about the Shine. Well, in the miniseries, that is expanded dramatically. Also, apparently, at least in the first half of the miniseries, everybody seems to understand that Danny is psychic, and they're fine with it, which seems totally different. There's a conversation. Dick Halloran really specifically talks about how much Danny glows in the dark with his shine. Like, they really drive home that whole shine concept, like as an analogy, and why that works. So I thought that was really good. And they also mentioned there was a really great line. I don't think it was in the film. The line was, "The hotel shines too," which I thought was a great line. When I watched the miniseries before I watched Dr. Sleep, I made a note of that line, and I'm really glad I did, because it was so relevant in understanding the mythology in Dr. Sleep. Does that make sense to you? Do you know why I like that? Yeah. Did you get that from the film, rewatching?
No, not at all. I mean, you could tell there was something about the hotel where it was something magical about it, but also kind of devious and evil. It seems to corrupt people. Mm-hmm. But for me, even rewatching, I didn't really get that there was a strong connection. Like you could, from the movie, you could assume just Dick had the powers, right? You don't even realize that the boy has powers. Like, the boy just seems to ride around on his bicycle.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So I was kind of taken back to my first watching of it, where I more felt like I'm the boy on the bicycle, right? Because I'm same age as him. No. Also, there was some funny things that I didn't realize before that I didn't remember at all, that were very strange on rewatching the first movie, that struck me very odd. Like for example, there's a scene where the mother goes upstairs. She's looking for Jack, and she's getting kind of crazy and manic, and she comes across a room, and there's like a guy in a very weird 1920s bear costume blowing another guy in a tuxedo.
Oh,
right?
Yeah.
And it's just like, it's very, I didn't remember that it was even there. But it's quite shocking, and it's just boom, it's there, and then it's gone, and it's very weird. I saw this. And there's a few things in the movie that are quite strange, but I saw this. I looked more into it, and it looked like, and I don't know what it came in the book, but it looked like there was some kind of like they were insinuating there was sexual abuse in the family relationship, and that's why the bear was there in the Shining movie. But it was very low key because they were saying like every time, and I think there were like 4 or 5 scenes where there were bears in the movie, and it happened to be like where Danny was in the picture. This was the only scene where there was a bear without Danny in the picture. So it was quite there's different things going on in the movie. I think one of my favorite things that I noticed on the rewatching that I missed the first time was that when Dick went back to, I think he lived in Miami or something. He lived in Florida, right? And he went back there because he hated to live in all the snow, and he wanted to be as far away from it as possible. And he has this like bachelor pad, like hot, sexy bachelor pad in Florida, and he's got like these velvet pictures of ladies with massive afros wearing nothing, and it's hilarious. Like it's quite because it just sticks out. It doesn't kind of follow the flow of the movie. It's a bit weird, and you kind of wonder like, oh, there's more to this guy, but then he shows up at the lodge and he gets killed right away, right? So yeah, and that's also apparently something different from the book. I guess in the book, he got like his leg hurt or something, and in the movie he gets an axe to the chest and he's dead. Right, so I think it's quite interesting. Like it was hard to see, that the boy was actually the main character, although the story seems to be partially from his point of view in the first movie. Also, it's not super clear from the first movie that the Shining is the boy in the hotel exactly. It just looks, most of the story and drama unfolds with the dad, and his struggles with alcoholism.
Yeah. Well, the miniseries, obviously Dick survives. He actually stays. He helps support the surviving family members. And it's a very different, it's like a happier ending. But there was an element in the miniseries that was totally absent from the movie version. And that was this older sort of teenage, 17-year-old, give or take, boy who is he's like an imaginary friend, and he's talking to young Danny throughout the film. He's giving him warnings, he's telling him things, he's sort of guiding him. And he seems friendly, but you don't know if he's a ghost or where he comes from, and he appears long before they're at the Overlook Hotel. And at the end of the film, like the last scene is the high school graduation of Danny. He's now much older, he's I guess 17, and he is that boy. So that teenage boy that he was talking to when he was younger. So he was speaking to his future self, or his future self was projecting himself into the past to guide his younger self. And of course, Dick is at the graduation. So that's a very different ending. But I think more interesting to me is the piece you were talking about before, which is in the Stanley Kubrick film, it's like there's a psychic older guy. There's a kid who may or may not have something psychic or unusual about him. And then there's a haunted hotel. And those things don't really seem directly connected.
Yeah, exactly. Correct? And I think, if I remember correctly, the kid was talking to Tony, right? He would say, like this, right? With his finger, right?
Oh, yeah.
And I think that was the only thing psychic that he was doing, was like kind of like having what looked like mini seizures or strokes and talking with his finger in a weird voice, right? And actually, I rewatched Dr. Sleep, and I found, actually, they refer to this in the Dr. Sleep movie. He says, I think Ewan McGregor says, like, oh, I used to just think my powers were another person, and I called it Tony when I was a kid. So it refers back and explains something a little more, but because in the first Shining, like I just inferred he was either talking to a ghost or a ghost was talking to him, or he was just a little bit crazy. I wasn't sure what was going on, but yeah, I think they kind of that was kind of tied up in the second movie where he said, "Oh, that's Tony," but to me it makes more sense. And also, I find there's for the movie versions, and I found I rewatched Doctor Sleep again lately. I find there's kind of a big gap in the story. Like you see, let's say if you take both movies together as a group, you see Danny in the hotel. He has this trauma. Then he's with his mom, just the two of them, and they're having these very intense interactions. And then, bam, he's in his 30s, right? And you
Okay.
you don't see anything else that's happened, and because you wonder like how did he get from this little boy to like a real deadbeat 30-something-year-old guy. So it's something
Right.
kind of missing from the movie story of this, and I guess it's probably more full in the books.
If I recall from from the little bit I read, in the book, his mother is more injured, and as a result is not able to really fully support them, and she's in a lot of pain, and she dies young. And so Danny is on his own relatively early and still unsure of what he's dealing with and in what he sees. And he sees people, black flies, I believe, flying around them before they die. So his mother's, the week leading up to her death is particularly traumatic for him because all he sees is flies, to the point where he can't even see her eyes really clearly. And he's so disgusted looking at her, and she sees that it mars her death or the experience of her death for him, and sort of chases him away from the fate that he ultimately decides on, which is using this ability to help guide people into death peacefully. Right. So he turns to alcohol at some point, and that's his downfall. And I think we're supposed to infer a lot of that in the film. But you're right. It was jarring. It was jarring for me. I agree 100%.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of a big gap in what could be a very interesting part of the story. But I mean, they already have what is the movie? It's like 2.5 hours. I think you can't cover everything, And they cover a lot of ground. They cover a really lot of ground.
Did you watch the director's cut or the regular theatrical?
The first time I watched the regular one. The second time. I watched the director's cut. To be honest, there was only one or two scenes I could pick out that were not in the first, and they didn't seem particularly. Yeah, I should have paid more attention, but they didn't seem particularly very telling scenes. But it was like I can't recall that they did explain something. I think. Actually, I think it was the scene where he mentioned that Tony was his powers. I think that was the scene that was in the director's cut.
Okay. Yeah, so I read a summary of the differences, and the reviews said the director's cut adds some things that I think thematically make the story work a little bit better, or pacing-wise help the characters feel a little bit more rounded out, like helpful stuff. But the summary I read didn't strike me as really critical information. So I think the editing probably, makes it work, makes it flow a little bit better, and it is kind of
I mean, you know what? I didn't even realize I was watching the director's cut, and then I kind of paused it about half the way through, and I saw in the title that it was the director's cut. And I thought, I need to pay attention and see. I'm curious to see because I'm always usually the director's cut. It's quite different scenes, and it adds a different feel to the movie. But I didn't find there was that much difference.
Yeah, I don't think there were any like major added scenes that you didn't. It was just pieces of other scenes, right? It was a little bit more here or there, which could be nice, but there wasn't like they didn't add a scene with miniguns. They just really were excited.
Exactly.
Sorry,
because I think we were talking about some of the differences to the book. I think one of the other weird ones to me that it seemed like Stanley Kubrick just kind of made his own thing and just was very loosely based on the book, right? Because the other thing that struck me very, very strange that I was trying to think how it would work. If I understood correctly, in the book there was no maze, but there were topiaries or bushes
That's right.
that
It was in the miniseries.
that came alive.
Yeah.
And I was just,
Yes.
but I can't remember how it was in the miniseries. I was just trying to think if Stanley Kubrick filmed this, it would be ridiculous. You have people in hedge costumes chasing Danny around. It doesn't.
It was
It's
not
not
much
as scary.
better.
Yeah, but it's not as scary as the maze and the freezing cold. So this was another very interesting thing. Actually, I think he made a good call to put the maze in instead of the topiaries for the visual effects they had at the time. It would have looked very cheesy.
Yeah, Kubrick has a real gift for atmospheric horror. He knows how to set a
Exactly.
scene. They created special weird sets for the hallways, for the hotel. Everything was disproportionate, so it was a bit offsetting or off-putting for the audience. There was something about it you couldn't quite put your finger on that made you uneasy because it actually wasn't built to regular proportions. In the miniseries, they filmed it in the hotel that inspired The Shining. But it's still a hotel with regular proportions. It's a normal building, and those topiaries are all really primitive CGI. So it is not amazing. It's not scary at all, really. Although they try hard.
Because I did remember that, but I was just thinking, there's no way that would be good.
No. No, they try really hard. They try to build it up with the soundtrack and everything, but it never works. I think there's a scene in the book where when Dick Halloran's on the way up the mountain to come back to save them, he's attacked by the topiary hedge animals. That wasn't in the miniseries, thank God. But so that all that stuff was cut wisely. I think it could work in your head maybe if you're reading the novel, but it's a stretch.
Yeah, no,
to film
because I was thinking, that would work very well in your imagination, but and especially with the animation, the effects at the time. I mean, think about special effects like in Star Wars or Flash Gordon or Conan. That would be the effects we would have, and that would be pretty terrible, I think. Crazy.
All right, so Dr. Sleep, we haven't actually talked a ton about that movie. What were your thoughts in general? Best part, worst part, any aspects of it that you loved or didn't like so much?
Yeah, okay. I thought because I really like the flow, how they do the chapters. Actually, I don't know why. Maybe I'm simple, but I like when they kind of break down movies into different chapters because then it helps you to follow the flow and understand kind of what's going on in this part. What's the message of this? They talk about what is it, the empty devils and the kind of tricks that they're playing on each other, and it's quite interesting the flow.
I believe that's a director's cut thing. The title cards? Are you talking about that refer to the sections? Yeah, that's a director's cut thing.
Oh, that is? Okay. Somehow I thought that was in the original movie as well.
You might be right. I might be crazy.
No, but that was pretty good. But I think just overall, I didn't have the first time I watched it, I didn't have a really high expectation because I thought every movie is kind of so these days. But I thought, the flow started good. I mean, with Rose the Hat, and it starts with her and the little girl Violet, and it's just so creepy.
Yeah,
and you can just imagine what happens to that girl, when they take her, but you don't know until later that it's much worse than you imagined.
Yeah.
So I think it starts very strong, and it starts on a good approach that these guys have been doing this for a long time, and they're doing it, time after time after time. And it's kind of these new cast of characters you didn't know from the first movie even existed, right? So, and I think I think the way they behave or the things they do, like their powers, quite different from person to person, and you don't even it's not like an X-Men movie. You don't have a list of powers like this person had X-ray vision, and they have kind of weird witchy powers. So it's kind of it's kind of interesting and disconcerting at the same time. But you see the protagonists also have different sets of powers that can't be really nailed down. And throughout the story, you keep finding, and I think this is also an interesting aspect, because you don't know what the antagonists can do, and you find, they can do things I didn't know about. They're really, especially Rose the Hat, very tricky. But then you keep finding, Danny and the girl, they actually have different powers as well. So I think this is quite interesting, and especially I think like one of the most interesting scenes is when, actually I think what is it, like 2/3 or 3/4 through the movie, you see they're doing actual how's it called, like astral projection. They're remote viewing, basically.
Right.
Different areas and looking for each other without being noticed. And so they're kind of using this thing that a lot of conspiracy theorists think is out there, and the government's trying to encourage this and ultra program and all this kind of stuff, right? So they're using this as a mechanism to kind of connect the characters, which I think is very, very interesting in the way they do it. Actually, when Rose was doing it, I was also reminded of The Big Lebowski, where he's floating through the air with the bowling ball. And I think this was, but it's quite interesting. And then especially when the little girl traps Rose inside her mind, when she's trying to plant suggestions and do something, and she gets her hand caught inside the drawer. And then she's reading Rose's mind really fast.
Yeah.
That's quite a really interesting turn and interesting thing, where the kind of hunter who you think is like a unbeatable, unfazable, bad guy suddenly becomes very weak, trapped prey.
Mm-hmm.
I thought that was a very interesting turn in the movie. What about you? What was your kind of best part, worst part, and most interesting thing that happened?
So undoubtedly, in my opinion, you nailed it. That unexpected reversal, or I guess Abra, to say it really clearly, is kind of dark and very, very competent. She's clever. She turns things around on them. She works really, really well with Danny, even recruits him. She has this deviousness that is so well suited for this. And instead of predator and prey, you have equal adversaries who are going at it. I almost at times felt sorry for the rest of the True Knot, because other than Rose, they were all just sheep who thought they were wolves. So that made a big chunk of this film really, really exciting and fun to watch. And I'd say right there, that alone makes the whole movie worth watching. The Shining references, some of the old shots and things that they integrated. Normally, I hate that stuff. I actually liked it. I don't mind. I didn't mind it in this context, and it kind of worked. I thought bringing back Jack Torrance was done. I didn't think I would like that. As soon as I figured out what was happening, I actually really liked that. I thought it was really powerful from the perspective of Dan to have that experience with his father. I absolutely hated the thumping heartbeat soundtrack. I feel like that is cliche and annoying, and it kept taking me out of the story. I wish I kept looking for an invisible knob to turn it down. But that was very annoying, and I'm not even going to talk about this because it's ridiculous, but Abra, really? That's her name? Abra?
Okay, yeah, I thought that, is that from the book? I have no idea.
It is from the book, and in the book, Abra and Dan are related.
Ah.
Yeah.
So he is Uncle Dan in real life. I mean,
basically
she calls him that, but that's just to fool people to think there's not a creepy old guy with me, right?
Right, which I thought was great and tied to something I really liked about the film, which is typically in a movie like this, a character like Dan, who has the history he has, and Abra, who's a young girl, like a tween or whatever, they make dumb decisions and they create problems for themselves. But throughout this film, they made what I thought were really reasonable decisions, and that was great. Yeah. Not just when they were fighting, but this whole idea of Uncle Dan, using the name or referring to him as uncle so that he doesn't look like a pedophile. The only thing I thought was going to get him in trouble was when he had red rum smashed into his wall in his little bedroom there, and then digging up the baseball kid. I figured somehow those two things were going to connect and come back to haunt him. But as I understand it in the novel, the mother who's referenced, mother, which is Abra's grandmother, who's referenced briefly in the movie, is dying, I think, of cancer in the movie. She reveals at the end of the book or close to it that Dan and Abra are related via, I want to say, Dan's father slept with somebody else. And so she's sort of like a what would that be? Half niece, I guess. I guess half sister? Half niece. Right, because her mother is Dan's half sister. I believe, is what comes out. So anyway, they cut all that out of the movie, which I guess makes sense. It's fine. But the grandmother is
quite complicated too, right? I mean,
it would have been, but the grandmother or Abra's grandmother is also very powerful with the shine, which implies that it's somehow passed down through the family. And she plays a role in how the true knot is defeated. So it's a very different aspect of the book, but
Oh yeah, because I thought something that was interesting was like the mom seemed to know that Abra had powers, like, and would ask her to find the keys or something.
Right.
But also there was a scene where she asked how Momo, the grandmother, is she going to make it? She's asking her, how long does she have or something like this, and Abra's just like, oh yeah, I don't know, tell her hi for me, wish her well,
Yeah,
she's trying to hide that she has the power. She doesn't want to make it so open. But mom seems to know something's up, right? She knows.
Yeah.
She has something. Maybe it's because the grandmother had powers as well. It could be.
It could be.
Well, you remember, like Dick. Dick said he learned from his mother or his grandmother.
Oh gosh, who was?
Yeah, I think he said in Dr. Sleep he learned it. Oh, maybe it was. I don't remember which one. He said he learned from his grandmother.
I think so.
She taught him the trick about putting them in a box.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
Because that came from his mother or grandmother. So I think somehow there is some family thing to it. But I don't know, that there's too many stories like this where, oh, wow, the main characters are related. It's kind of very cliche as well.
Absolutely.
It would be an interesting twist, but it's also cliche. And I thought...
Go ahead.
Yeah. Yeah, sorry. I thought what was interesting was some of the ancillary characters, right? Like Dr. Joe, and is it Billy, who gets him into the rehab. I mean, they're quite strong characters in the story, and very well done. And especially Billy, goes with him to dig up dead bodies and shoot people.
Yeah.
I mean, it's really amazing. Like, this guy is on board for this. I mean, but it really, he's a good character and really progresses the story quite well. And unfortunately, he's killed. I mean, because he can't resist the power of the knot, right? The pusher. But no, but I think it added a lot to the movie as well.
Did you think?
I want to say something. Sorry to interrupt you. You're right about the heartbeat. I was thinking about this last night. It's because I loved that they started with some kind of ominous music at the start. They had the Stanley Kubrick, like this. It was good. And then I think a lot of the sound effects were good. But then, every time that heartbeat came up, actually, I think they used it as well as they could, because they made it slower or faster, and that was kind of interesting. Like, it let you know something sinister is coming. And sometimes it's like, very slow at the start, and then it goes a little bit faster.
That's true.
No, but I did find it was distracting. Like, it was like a little bit of a too simple of a device. So thanks for pointing that out. Actually, I may not have thought about it, but last night when I was watching it, I found it very distracting, like very annoying.
Yeah, it is omnipresent. About the time you get over it and start thinking it's not that bad, it's back. And it's louder and it's faster. I couldn't turn it off. Maybe it was just in my head. Maybe that's my shine. So I wanted to ask you, you were just saying something a second ago too that was really interesting. We'll have to circle back to it. So
sure.
Steam, the shine, and the soul. Same thing? different things?
I thought it was the same thing because I thought about this a little bit. Something interesting. You notice when he was Dr. Sleep in the hospice, there was some steam coming out of the people who didn't have any shine. Or
Right.
actually, if I understood from the movies, the two movies collectively correctly, everybody's got a little shine. And just it's so little that maybe you don't know.
Mm.
And if you're dark, maybe you don't have that much shine. Don't know, right? But I know you notice, like, I think all the people in the hospice that died, when they died, they had a little bit of steam come out. Not
Right.
a lot,
Right.
a little bit, very faint. But I guess the shining people had more steam. I think it is the soul somehow. But then, are you to say that people that have the shining have more soul than normal people? That seems a little bit strange to me. It's a strange supposition. What did you think?
I thought it was unclear, right? I originally, for a big chunk of the film, I felt like the shine and steam were different things. Like shine being the ability to use your steam, and steam being something that everyone possesses. And then perhaps the steam is different for those who shine.
Mm-hmm.
But as the movie went on, I was less clear on that distinction, and it seemed to blur a lot. And I think part of the reason for that is exactly what you were saying, right? When you see how Dr. Sleep finds his niche, right? It's largely around helping people's steam move to the next type of existence. We go on, they said repeatedly. And also watching Baseball Boy end, which was pretty tough. That was brutal.
That was very brutal. I was a bit shocked. Like that was a bit. I guess I knew they weren't, treating these kids nicely or whatever, but I didn't realize they were like brutally torturing them to get more of the steam out. It's quite crazy.
Yeah, and there was something really mechanical. It wasn't like typically with vampires, they absorb or suck or, like they almost sort of magically consume. But there was something quite paramedic about this, or the opposite of that. She was pumping the soul or the steam out of this child. It was pretty disgusting and very visceral.
Yeah, it was quite disturbing.
Yeah.
Quite disturbing.
So
I'm glad they didn't show it in every case that they had a victim, though, too. Like that would have been quite hard to watch.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and I was also a little like the idea of what is this steam, what is shine, what is the soul, or how is this movie portraying those things? I think was also a little bit muddied by the fact that the True Knot members, when they died, they turned into steam, and my understanding of the process that turns them into members of the True Knot I assumed up to that point that they gave up their souls, like that They were no longer human and they were empty vessels, and they were consuming the steam of, or the souls of, those with shine. I don't know if they could or couldn't feed off of somebody who doesn't shine, but maybe they can't. Maybe then they still have, but whatever it is, whatever steam is, they still had it, and they had a lot of it. We watched Old Man Flick was his name, I think, or Grandpa. When he died, he released a large amount of that stuff, and the rest of them consumed it. So I don't think it's a soul.
No, you made a good point, because I think even in that chapter where they were kind of introduced, or that they were showing more about, they were called empty devils, right? They're hollow, right? They're not made of anything. That's why they need to absorb the steam from other people. No, but you're right. Then suppose they shouldn't have any. They should just kind of
and maybe that wasn't theirs. Like when they die, maybe the steam you see is the residual steam from others that they're holding in their form, and it's finally released. Or maybe whenever they feed, they save their bodies, or their shells hold some of it. And so when they expire, or when that shell is compromised, then it collapses, and what they've held of those they've consumed is released, sort of freeing the pieces of those individuals or those people that they've consumed. I don't know. I mean, that would still basically work, but it doesn't explain. It means that the steam and the shine are two different things, right?
Yes, it does.
Yeah. And that's kind of where I landed with that. And I feel like it's important to understanding the creative ideas of this world. I don't know if Stephen King actually would want it that defined, but to me, it seems like that makes the most sense.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. And obviously Stanley Kubrick would not want it defined at all.
No, right. Yeah. He wanted to
just insinuate everything.
Absolutely. The question I wanted to ask you before: do you think Billy shone, or had the shine, or was shiny?
Billy.
Was he a shiner?
Sorry, who's Billy?
Oh wait, was that the friend? What was his name?
Oh, yeah, the friend Billy.
Yeah.
I'm going to look and see.
Wasn't he a shiner?
Yeah, I think he was. I think he had a little shine, because I think that's what they were referring to. Because he asked him a few times, like, "Hey, you seem to have a real sense about people without even knowing them that well. You seem to understand whether it's a good person or a bad person." He even said to the guy, like, "Hey, you can tell by your, I don't remember how he referred to it. He said, you can tell that I'm a good person. You trust me because you feel it."
Right.
Something like that. I think he referred to it, but I think he obviously wasn't like a heavy shine like Abra or Danny, but I think he definitely had it. He definitely had some small amount. That's why I think you heard from a couple of the other characters, like I think the landlord, when he was moving into the place, said, "Oh, you picked up another lost, stray.
Mm-hmm.
You're always doing this," something like that. And I think then Dr. Joe said something like, "Oh, if you picked the right wing to get under, this Billy's a good one, and he always takes great care of the people that he helps."
Right.
So I think he must have some kind of shine, but he's definitely has a heart and is looking out for people. He's quite a true protagonist. He's one of like the heroes of the whole story, I think, in fact.
Yeah, he adds a real tragic element because he is so good. He doesn't inadvertently allow a mother and a child to die and try to steal her money on the way out. He doesn't do any of those things. And I think that was the explanation for why he went to the lengths he went. I think they did a good job laying the foundation to explain why a character would go drive to another state, dig up a body, take a rifle, and start murdering people, all for someone that he presumably doesn't really know that well. And something that is very contrary to the character that we had been introduced to up to that point. Because he shone enough, or shined, or he was a shiner, he was shiny enough to, I can't quite get my mind or my vocabulary around that, but he was shiny enough to tell that Dan is good and should be trusted, right? And that's apparently an ability. Speaking of the abilities, we had a pusher, right? We had a looker. Looker, I guess, was that Crow, who had the ability to kind of hunt people with the shine. We had astral projection, telepathy, telekinetics, precognition, which was described as one possible future in the miniseries. They clarified that there's not one single future that people with the shine or certain people with the shine can see, but one possible one. And there was also the ability to communicate with your past self. There was a possession was introduced to great effect. I love that scene. At one point,
that was a great scene. Yeah.
So there was a whole array of powers. It was a pretty vast collection. And one thing that bugged me a little bit is it seemed like basically anything that's ever been presented as a psychic ability in any format is now thrown into this grab bag, right? There's not really any rules, just anything goes. Was that?
Yeah, that's true. I mean, no, I think you're right. I think there's no rules, and also it seems like everything they did was like new to everybody.
Right.
It's just even Rose was saying, "Oh yeah, no," and she's presumably lived, I don't know, 1,000 years or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And because she was talking to, what is it, the grandpa Flick.
Yeah.
She said, "Oh yeah, you what was it? You saw the Romans invade Constantinople or whatever." She was. I guess they were quite old. No, but and like everything that Abra was doing, it seemed like, oh, I've never seen that before. It was weird. Like you said, it's a grab bag. Even if you have a good feeling about people, that's now shine.
Yeah,
and it seemed like not very well defined. I mean, you made a very comprehensive list, but it seemed like there were things like some of these like tricks that they played, like the switching, or when Abra made them think that she was sitting on the table, but it was actually a stuffed rabbit.
Mm-hmm.
That was a really good trick and interesting and clever, but they were all fooled by it. Like nobody had seen that before, I guess.
Yeah. It was bizarre. It was very much kind of a Wild West when it came to the powers. Like anyone can do anything, and it seemed like Dan was discovering new abilities, and that made less sense. It was almost like Abra activated him or reactivated him. There was the whole notion that steam fades as you age, but clearly with Dan it did not, and it wasn't apparent if that was because he was so strong with it to begin with, or because the True Knot, and especially Rose, didn't really understand it after thousands of years, which I think is really more interesting. She also was surprised, I guess, or unclear what she was dealing with when she was in the Overlook. Right?
Yeah, no, you're right. I think, I think Danny said it. He said something like, he said it to the crew. I think he said, "You're very arrogant." I think if you look at these guys seem to only hunt like 10-year-old or less kids for hundreds of years or thousands of years or however, right? So maybe they're not used to coming up against people who kind of know something about it.
Sure.
And it sounded like Danny got lucky to find Dick Hallerman and get some kind of training from somebody that knew something about it. But in real life, it would probably be hard for these people to connect unless they're very, very strong.
That's interesting.
Probably a lot of the people, they think there's something wrong with them. Oh, fuck, I can see ghosts, or I can move things with my mind, or, whatever, right?
Right.
Then they're probably very isolated, and maybe they're put in institutions. So probably it's very easy pickings for this group of the True Knot, right?
Yeah.
So probably they almost never come up with somebody that knows how to fight back or realizes that they can fight back.
Or has developed their abilities.
Exactly.
And they've gotten arrogant.
Like at all.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think Danny said it in one of the scenes. I think it was to the Crow, but maybe it was to Rose. I can't recall. Yeah, and she did say something interesting. She was saying, "Oh, it's like whiskey," when she was having his steam, right?
Yeah. Right. Well, so you mentioned two things. One is the Crow, or what was his name? Something the Crow. Anyway, he didn't have a seatbelt on. And that was what Dan referred to as arrogant through Abra when he possessed her and then took control of the wheel, like made him drive into a tree, which was amazing. That was like a double. I don't recall anyone using two abilities simultaneously.
Yeah, that's right.
And so that was fascinating. It was like Dan used Abra to do an ability, or to use one of her abilities on him, which was that was so exciting and so cool. But the other thing you mentioned there was Rose being surprised that Dan had steam and that the steam wasn't bad.
Yeah.
Right? Which, again, sort of fits with your point of they'd been preying on children for so long that they didn't know what was out there. And they, maybe because of their limitations of what they are now, they can't even really develop their abilities. And they're locked into whatever ability they had developed up to the point when they were turned. And maybe that's all they have. Or maybe in Rose's case, they could do a little more if they had a little more steam to begin with, or they were a little more clever. But in all that time, they had obviously not encountered a lot of these abilities or had dealt with people who developed them.
Yeah, I mean, this must be the case. I think there's no other. And even, you see, what was it, that scene where Rose is facing Danny? she kind of says it's gross, right? Like, oh,
Mm.
you're covered with oil, your steam's disgusting, and then she starts drinking it, and like, wow, that's amazing. So I think she obviously didn't have much experience with it. So it's a, I mean, maybe she had like the people in the hospice, they have a little bit of steam come out. She tried it, it's like, oh, that's gross. Maybe something like that. I'm not sure.
Well, it's exciting because it opens up a lot of possibilities, and it means that we're not trapped with what they said or by what they said, which is as you get older, you lose it, right? So any further stories in this universe would need to be about children. That's not the case anymore, and it's more compelling.
It's not the case, but I think that's one of those things. Like if you don't, I think when you're a kid and you're changing and growing, you're more likely to, and you don't have any preconceived notions about what is and isn't possible. You're more likely to discover or to have this thing happen. And as you get older, you push down these things and you say, oh no, that's not possible, or you chalk it up to luck or coincidence rather than saying, oh, I've got the ability to read somebody's mind or whatever.
So if you don't use your steam, you lose it.
Not lose it, but you push it down. You don't.
Okay, your steam is less accessible.
Yeah, not even accessible, but you say like, I can't do that because science says no. I think it's one of those things like, oh, I'm an adult now. I'm not scared of the dark anymore. And also I don't have superpowers, right? Like I can't fly or bend spoons with my mind, because I can't. So I think you lock yourself into what you can and can't do because your mind gets more set as you get older. And Danny's just not done it because he's afraid of it. And I think he's afraid of what happens.
Yeah, and because he had an experience. He had a little bit of a mentor, or I guess a mentor who stayed with him. Yeah. Because he did. And so he had that, and he had an experience with the supernatural that then, in accordance with your theory, which I really love, kept his mind open and aware of these possibilities.
Yeah.
And kept his steam from being suppressed, even though he suppressed his shine to some extent with alcohol and poor self-abuse. Does that fit?
Yeah, I think so. What I thought was interesting, though, was it seemed the alcohol didn't necessarily repress it. It just made it unfocused and made him kind of forget.
Yeah.
But I thought he would have more problem when he went sober. Like, this is something they didn't really focus on.
True.
Like, I thought he would have more, like, run-ins with ghosts or whatever, premonitions.
Yeah.
When he was sober, but it just seemed like he just tuned it out. He tried not to listen.
Interesting. So one of the interesting questions, one of the ideas in the film that I wanted to ask you about was this statement that there is not as much steam in the modern world, that it's harder to come by. And I think you've already answered why that is. What do you think?
Actually, I thought that line was very, very interesting. I think the crow, he seemed to be one of the most perceptive and kind of intelligent of the group. I mean, he was one of the last to make it, and Rose was obviously very arrogant because she's the most powerful by far. But he was like the most sensible one. He's always saying things, that made sense, and like, hey, be careful because you're taking a lot of risk. You need to think about it. I liked his character a lot, actually. But honestly, not just steam, but I think in life, like creativity and, I don't know, intelligence, it seems like that's getting less in the world as well, right? And I think if I recall correctly, the reasons the Crow gave was like, because Netflix, because like these SNS apps, because like people use their smartphones too much, it's the waves, like there's less steam in the world. I think he's just trying to say something that we all relate to. Is it looks like, from let's face it, I'm a certain age, same age as Danny, and also I'm probably same age as the guy that played Jack, played the father, right? Jack
it was
Nicholson?
The boy
No, it was the boy from E.T., right? That played the father in the movie,
Elliot?
right? Elliot. Yeah,
Elliot.
yeah. So that's funny, right? It's a big circle for him. Quite interesting. But I got off track. I think all of us can relate to this, where you think, oh, there's less intelligence in the world, there's less creativity, there's less, like people going outside and living their lives because they're stuck looking at their phone, or they're looking at Netflix, or they're watching too many movies as we are. Uh, I think you're losing something. I mean, and I think everybody in the world these days can probably relate to this. So I think this is something quite interesting they throw into the movie. There's less steam in the world. I think they're saying there's less spirit, there's less soul. If we agree that the steam is spirit and soul, no, I guess it's probably true. I mean, these guys are starving, and here's Rose is looking so. I got the impression that they ate better in the past, right? It seems like they had more meals more often with better quality in the past hundreds of years, and then now it's getting harder and harder. And she's on the top of the bus every night looking for the whale, right? Looking for that one big catch that they can live off of for quite a long time. And if you look at their steam containers, I recall there was only like 3. Then they open one, and then in the last part of the movie, the Rose eats the 2 containers at once. So they were getting very low anyway. What do you think? What do you think?
I think you're dead on. I think spirit is a much better word than soul. And I think your point is that these things that they mentioned and many other things that we're aware of, either consciously or on some level, are dulling our spirits and collectively, or our collective spirit. And as a result, there's not as much steam in the world. It also helps me understand theoretically why pain and fear purify steam, because they awaken the spirit, right? Facing a death in that way is the exact opposite of staring at your phone and opening an app you've opened the 50th time in the last hour and looking at something that hasn't, a list that hasn't even refreshed. Like that is pain and fear of the type they demonstrated with that small boy, the baseball boy. It's exactly the opposit of that. And I can understand why it would purify it in a way, or certainly activate it. So I think you nailed it. I think we can all go to sleep now.
Oh, I'm just starting my day.
All right. So I have one more question. Actually, I have 2 more questions. I have one more question, though. It's a big question. All right. So in this film, we have psychic abilities. We have vampires. Right. What, if any, are the creative ideas in this movie?
Okay. That's interesting. From my point of view, if we talk about what's the kind of creative thematic idea, I don't know. I think they're talking about a lot of the things are talking about human connections where you protect people, right? And I think like one of the I don't know if this is the way you were going with that question, but like one of the things that Dick was saying to Danny the last time they met was Danny says, he's not that nice a person. Okay. And you can understand why. I mean, he had a traumatic event when he was a kid. He's got these powers that are very unwelcome. And he thinks he's doing the best he can to use it to help people in hospice to have an easy passing. He thinks that's clearing his soul and giving him some redemption. But Dick says, no, you need to pay it forward. And Danny says, why do I have to help Abra? Why do I have to help these people? Why can't we just live our life and let those people go do their thing? And I think, Dick says you have to pay it back. You have to help people with this. I think that's an interesting message. I think, I think everybody. I think if you're in front of a bunch of people and you're asked the question, are you going to help helpless people or innocent people? You're going to say yes. But I mean, I think in most people's heart of hearts, we're geared towards inaction and self-protection, and we want to hide and keep our spirit to ourselves and not waste it on other people.
But let it dull in the meantime. Yeah,
maybe let it dull, but at the same time, you don't waste it on things that not going to help yourself in a way. I think everybody is,
Well, let me
is a
jump
little
in.
bit greedy.
I think this movie, to your point, says very clearly that we go on.
Mm-hmm.
So Dick's message to Dan may seem horribly unfair for someone who has power, who has suffered, who is humble and uses that power to help others, to ask someone like that to do more. The question might be why. But based on what you're saying, perhaps it was because we go on and there's more to life than just what we experience and what we do when we are living in this one. So he was asking Dan to do something that maybe would help him in the next life or the next part of existence. But where were you going with it?
Oh no, I think it's to me. I mean, I think that connects to my point, but I was saying like I think it's easy to be inactive. I think it's easy to do the minimal, and I think it's a reminder. If you do more, you can help more. And I think that's true. I mean, not only with superpowers, but I think anything. It doesn't take that much more effort to help people a lot. And I think that does tie to your point, which is absolutely a true theme from the movie. Is there is something after this. You will go on, and are you going to be a ghost in a hotel and get put in a box? Or are you going to go to a better place? It's not really. It's kind of up to you, is what I understood. I mean, they weren't really saying there was a heaven or hell, but I think things can be better or worse depending on what you do in your life.
Absolutely, that's a great thought. So there's been talk about a prequel following the life of Dick Halloran when he was younger and exploring that a little bit. That aside, if this property, if the rights to it were dumped in your lap, what would you do next with this universe?
This is tricky because now there's been a lot of things done with it. Do you go the way of the miniseries and just say, forget about that other thing and look at this is the real deal? I don't know. And a prequel is a good idea, but I think there's a big batch of Danny's life missing. But there's been such a big life, let's say, world-changing confrontation now between the true Knot and Danny and Abra. I think the most compelling or interesting thing, okay, Dick would be great because there must be a lot of story, and I want to see more of those velvet paintings with the with the afros and whatever. And he looks like a very compelling character that was in the movie world was kind of cut short. He always got the kind of quickly shuffled off set, too fast, right? Getting the axe to the chest, or he's getting tired in the dreamland, and this is his last time. So there's definitely more story there. I don't know how compelling it would be. I'm interested to see what happens in Danny between the time he's a little boy and the time that he's a 30-something-year-old man. That could be very interesting. Like you say in the miniseries, talking back to his younger self, or maybe he did find out more about his abilities, and maybe it scared him, and that's why he went to alcohol. We don't know. But I think the most compelling would be what happens now. Because I think one thing Rose alluded to was they said, "Oh, you're the last one," and she said, "No, I'm not the last one." What does she mean?
Right.
We thought the true Knot was it. But they said something about like they came. What was it? They were in Asia. They rode across Europe. They came across to the New World. Apparently these guys were everywhere, right? Yeah, so I think that would be the most interesting way to take it, was like what happens next.
It's what do you complicated. Think? So thematically, I would absolutely want to follow your ideas about the spirit, right? So, at the core, I hate prequels. I'm just going to say it. I'm sorry, Star Wars burned me. Don't like prequels anymore. Sequels, I like. If we did a sequel, I'm good with spinoffs. I'm good with TV series. I'm good with anything. But what I would want to see thematically is that it follows the idea of how we treat our spirit and how that affects us, both in this world and the next world, how it affects others, how spirits interact. I would be interested in seeing how steam interacts, between individuals if it does, or shine if it does, or manifests between individuals. I think those things would be interesting. I also really found it interesting that the idea that the hotel shines just like people do, which in
Yeah.
my mind opens up a big world where
Yeah.
many things can shine for different reasons, maybe, or for related reasons that aren't always the same. I can think of potentially a lot of other types of predators of shine, or a lot of other types of symbiotic or parasitic relationships with shine, almost like an ecosystem, or steam, I should say.
Yeah. Think about
But
Christine.
I love all that stuff, and I think as long as you stick to the thematic idea of the spirit and understanding how our choices affect our spirit, what it does to us, and what that means for us in the present, the future, and after we're gone, then I think you can do a lot of really exciting, really cool things. And apparently, there's an unlimited number of psychic abilities that you can play with too if you want to. I think it's nice to take a break because this universe is heavy, and when you do
Yeah.
films, it
Yeah.
can be pretty intense. But obviously, if the right story came around and it wasn't just Abra older kind of reliving some version of this slightly different, if it wasn't Ghost of Dan, then yeah, I guess I'd be fine with a sequel. Although I did like all those characters, I just don't think it'd be really hard to do them justice. I think if this movie had come out 5 years or 2 years after The Shining, then I think it would have felt weird to have Jack Nicholson in some scenes, and I guess 15 years after The Shining, so that Danny could be an adult. But I still think it would have felt weird.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, so I don't think I would necessarily do another film. Maybe not right away. Maybe not with the same characters or the same actors. But I think this is a rich universe to explore. All right. Well, thank you. Any other thoughts before we wrap it up?
Well, I think something we didn't cover. What about the bad?
Other than the heart-thumping soundtrack, what would you say was the bad of the movie?
No, because I was wondering, because I had told some friends, like I told you, that this was quite a good movie, and then some people, I don't know, had negative reactions. I saw some reviews that were not great, so I wanted to know more. I looked at it, and I think what they were saying was like, oh, basically the whole scene with the hotel was not in the book, because obviously the hotel was destroyed in the first book. And then some of the things I was looking at called, like, that whole scene in the hotel was kind of fan service, basically.
Which
and
scene?
Then when I was watching
the finale.
I mean the whole thing. Because basically think about the book had no hotel. I don't know where they faced
in the ruins
Rose.
of the hotel. It's an RV park.
In the ruins of the hotel. So it's quite a similar thing.
Yeah,
is it?
It is.
But no, but they did go a little heavy. I mean, they did a great job. I mean, to be honest, I mean, when I watched the kind of behind the scenes, I mean, actually, I think one of the reasons that the director did this movie is he wanted to recreate that hotel and like play around in the space and like do the filming and kind of be like Kubrick. Like it was, and when I rewatched the movie, I did see actually, that was very fan servicey. It was kind of almost looked like it was just stuck in to the movie a little bit. Like it interrupted the flow. Like, hey, let's stop what we're doing and drive to Colorado. And I guess they did that in the book anyway. But it seemed to be it changed the whole space. Like the whole movie was kind of like open world. Like we're here, we're there, we're going back and forth. And that one, it locked it down inside the hotel, inside this like demon building. And so I thought it was somehow it did hurt the flow. It did hurt the flow of the movie, and I think it was very fan service. I mean, but they did a great job. I mean, it looked amazing, especially when Danny's going around on his little bike around the halls. I mean, you couldn't tell that it was a different place, or you couldn't tell it was a new set at all. Like it was very well done.
Yeah, I thought it was jarring when the moment I realized they were going back to the hotel. I do agree. It was a bit jarring, but it teetered on the edge for me and ultimately tipped over to acceptable because it was explained. It made sense. Like he made a
Yeah.
choice. It was a tactical decision. It was a questionable one.
You're
Sure,
right.
we can debate it, but I get why he did that, I think, from the story. And so I was fine with it. I thought in the end, I was enjoying the ride so much that I was willing to accept that. But you're right. It was a bit jarring and it did teeter a bit, I think. But I think it was okay. I think another thing that helped me a lot that I forgot to mention is I watched this movie in 3 chunks over a day and a half, but I watched about 30, 40 minutes of it, took a break, next day watched another 30 minutes or so, and then finished it, I think later that night or the next day. And that actually really helped because I felt like I had more energy. I wasn't as worn down by the story, which can be a little bit thick. It's kind of heavy. It's a little bit dark. It's interesting and it's a good ride, but it's not exactly like a fun thrill ride the whole time.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, and it's such a crazy long movie. I think after an hour and a half, and especially after the scene with the baseball kid, like, yeah, I mean, it's hard to focus and pay attention that long and pay attention to all
and
the
absorb
details.
a lot.
Yeah, exactly. And it goes so many places. Like it's all kind of all over the place.
And it touches on important things only briefly several times. And if you have a little bit of time to catch your breath and think about it, then before you move on to the next chunk, then it gave me a chance to kind of realize some things and then go into the next section more ready for what was going to happen and feeling like I had a richer context, which is, I guess, an argument for this to be a miniseries, right? That's what they should have done. ABC miniseries.
Yeah, agreed. I don't know, but there's all these there's all these streaming services now. I mean, one of them should pick this up
and chunk it. Yeah,
and chunk it. Yeah, exactly.
I think for a second we almost talked ourselves back into making another miniseries out of this one, just like they tried in 1997.
Just got to get a recovering porn star in it, and then you're all good.
Listen, she was fabulous. She is such a great actress. She walked the line between strong and vulnerable, like in a believable human way that is so, so much better than the Kubrick movie. I'm telling you, her performance almost makes it worth sitting through all those commercials for Zyrtec.
And that's true, actually. There's a lot written about the original movie, like what they did to the actress who played the mother originally. I mean, it's like quite disturbing the way they treated her, and also like it's quite different from the book, as I understood too. Like she's basically just a very weak character in the movie.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, she's a true victim.
Yeah,
in my opinion.
Yeah,
throughout most of the film, and the miniseries could not be more different. She is honestly the hero, and she waits just a little too long. Like her instinct for survival kicks in just a little bit too late, but it's very clear that it's because she's still in love with the man that her husband used to be, that she thinks he still is. And I guess at the end of the miniseries, there's a moment of redemption and where he is that person again briefly. But honestly, like it's such a believable arc for her, a journey for her through the film. So much through the miniseries, so much better. That character, no doubt, is better. Would not have fit probably in the Kubrick film, but really, really good. And I don't know how much of that is the writing, how much of that is Rebecca De Mornay, but she really, really crushes it. Like it was great to see her in fine form. And it made me question why she isn't an A-list actress or considered one, at least from what I understand, not making big budget films. I'm not sure. I took a look. She's done a lot. She's been working consistently.
She did a lot.
She was in Jessica Jones not too long ago. She had a part in that. I think part of the problem might be she's not recognizable, but I'm not sure. I don't know. She was, at least in 1997, extremely talented and brought in a great performance.
No, I think she's good. I was making light, but I think she is talented.
Surprisingly. No, I'm agreeing with you. Like I saw it. I watched this miniseries before, and I remember Hand That Rocks the Cradle, I believe, was one of her breakthrough roles.
Yeah.
She was great in that. And I was still surprised repeatedly throughout the miniseries of how good she was. It's probably part of how I made it through my 100th Lisa Saturn commercial. I'm just not used to that many commercials. It was a rough ride. All right, good. Anything else that you wanted to touch on?
No, that's it. I mean, thank you for doing this with me. It's quite enjoyable experience.
Oh, thank you. I really appreciate it, and I hope everybody enjoyed this as much as I did. So good luck with your retirement.
Yeah, I'm trying to keep it clean, trying to get my spirit high.
That's right. Keep your steam clean. That's my new thing.
Clean. That's right. Steam clean. I'm going to steam clean.
All right, so for the rest of you, just a reminder that I'm always looking for good recommendations. My only rules are, first, has to be fiction, and second, it needs to be complete. I want a whole story, no partial stories, nothing halfway through being released. I want to be able to judge and discuss the creative ideas within the full context of a released project. If you do recommend something, let me know what aspects you found most creative and most interesting. I hope you guys all have a great week, and I'll see you next time.